On March 13th, 1919, a letter was published in the local paper that would grip the city of New Orleans with equal parts fear and absurdity. And 6 days later, the city would be forced to play jazz the whole night or risk everything. Welcome back to Legends May Live, where we explore the strange, the mysterious, and the downright eerie. I'm Drew, and today's story mixes the absurd with true horror. But before we get into that, just a quick note that all of our stories are based on true events, but sometimes the details can get murky over time, so just take it as entertainment. New Orleans in 1918 was a city that never quite slept. It didn't toss and turn either, it swayed. Streetcars rattled past shotgun houses with peeling paint and jasmine-wrapped porches. Cypress shadows leaned against cobblestones like long fingers, and from open windows music drifted out warm ribbons. Ragtime here, a trumpet lick there. The city always seemed to be humming to itself. But behind the music, there was pressure, the kind people don't talk about unless they have to. The war had ended, but soldiers were drifting home changed. The flu had come through and left its mark. For most, though, there was a share of fun, but it was still a hard life. Money was tight, rumors were cheap, and some neighborhoods belonged to men you never met in the daylight and you didn't want to meet after dark. Around this time, many Italian immigrants ran small corner grocery shops, and usually they would live above their stores. They would drift to sleep to the scent of oranges and fresh bread. The cash register never held very much, but a day's take was enough to keep the lights on. And as they would lock up every night, they would tidy up the store, bring in any boxes from outside, usually leave the axe they used for chopping wood or breaking ice by the back steps. Then they would close the heavy, sturdy doors and latch the windows before lying down. It was a routine life, but sometimes a simple life can be a good one. The New Orleans police patrols were also pretty routine. They were usually the same drunks, the same domestic calls, with a few fights here and there. Nothing really all that crazy. So they weren't ready for something that blurred the lines between human and myth. Something that doesn't leave fingerprints. Not because it's careful, but because it moves through the city like a rumor. Quick, shapeless, and already gone when you turn your head. Some said it was the Black Hand, just old country extortion with new city teeth. Others said it was a drifter, hitchhiking rides on boxcars, and some swore that it was simpler than that. It was just a madman with a thirst for violence. Whatever the case, it became known as the Axeman. By the time the papers caught up, the story was already writing itself. In locked bedrooms, in rooms that smelled like iron, in homes where lamps burned low and nobody heard the first sound. If you believe some historians, the Axeman's shadow was already stretching across New Orleans years before the city ever gave him a name. In 1910 and 1911, a string of violent, strange break-ins targeted mostly Italian grocers. The details were almost exactly the same each time. A panel on the back door carefully chiseled away. No broken lock, just a neat, silent opening, large enough for a man's hand to reach through, unlatch the door, and step inside. The attacker never brought his own weapon. He didn't have to. In every home and shop, an axe leaned by the door or hung on a nail out back. It was for splitting wood or for cutting ice, and that axe became the murder weapon. On May 23rd, 1918, just after dawn, Andrew Maggio, a local barber, decided to check on his brother Joseph and Joseph's wife Catherine. Their home sat above the grocery store that they ran together, and as he arrived, the smell of fruit and flour dust still clung to the air. But the shop was eerily quiet as he called out for them. He slowly walked up the stairs and knocked on their front door. There was no answer, so he decided to let himself in. And as he pushed the door open, he continued calling out for them. He looked all around the house, but when he got to the doorway of their bedroom, there they laid. Both of them were dead. From what police could tell, they had been attacked while they slept. Their throats appeared to have been cut with a straight razor, and their skulls were crushed with an axe. The bed sheets were drenched, and the walls were covered with splatter. The razor belonged to Andrew himself. He had misplaced it days earlier. And the axe, which was also left behind, still covered in blood, was Joseph's. But what was strangest about the gruesome scene is that nothing was stolen. The cash register downstairs still had all the money in it, and nothing of value seemed to be missing from anywhere. 3 months later, on the night of August 5th, 28-year-old Anna Schneider was 8 months pregnant and sleeping alone while her husband worked the night shift. She woke to a shadow standing over her and the smell of iron, and before she could scream, the blows began. She survived, though her scalp was split and her face beaten so badly she could barely open her eyes. She never saw the weapon clearly. All she could tell was that it was blunt, and she couldn't describe her attacker except that she felt him, just the weight of his presence. 2 weeks later, 2 sisters were in their elderly uncle's house. His name was Joseph Romano, and when they turned to the kitchen, they did so just in time to see him staggering toward the door. His head was covered in blood from a vicious axe blow. They rushed to steady him, but before he collapsed, they caught a glimpse of someone in the doorway. A tall man in a dark suit and slouch hat. He slipped into the streets. Romano died 2 days later. The killer left behind his usual calling card, nothing stolen, and an axe left at the scene. The city was starting to connect the dots. The chiseled door panels, the use of the victim's own axe, the choice of targets. Newspapers began whispering that the possibility that this was all the work of one man. But what no one realized yet was that the story was about to leap off the crime pages and into the realm of something much darker and far stranger. By March of 1919, the city was on edge. The attacks were brutal, seemingly random, and the killer never took so much as a nickel. And then he decided to take things a little more public. He decided to write to the news station. And what he had printed up in the local paper was this: "Esteemed mortal, they have never caught me, and they never will. I am not a human being, but a spirit and a demon from the hottest hell. I am what you Orleans and your foolish police call the Axeman. When I see fit, I shall come again and claim other victims. But mark you well, all of the people of your city will be spared if they play jazz in their homes. And in this you will know that I am true, for I am very fond of jazz." The letter ran in full on March 13th. It was absurd, it was terrifying, and it gave the city 6 days to prepare for the night of March 19th. And when that night came, the city transformed into one great orchestra. Every saloon, every dance hall, every parlor was alive with music. Musicians packed bars shoulder to shoulder. Families huddled in living rooms, spinning records on wind-up gramophones, their hands shaking as they set the needle down. People danced, drank, and pretended it was just another night. But between songs, eyes drifted to windows, to doorways, to the dark corners of the street. Because somewhere out there, maybe leaning in a shadow, maybe standing at the edge of a lamplight, the Axeman was listening. No murders were reported that night, and that was enough to turn a killer into a legend. By the summer of 1919, the Axeman had done more than spill blood. He had rewired the city. Every unlocked door was a risk. Every shadow felt heavier. And yet, he wasn't finished. Steve Bocca, another Italian grocer, awoke in the dead of night to find a dark figure standing over his bed. Before he could speak, the first blow came. He staggered out into the street, dazed and bleeding, calling for help. Neighbors found his door chiseled open. His own axe lay in the kitchen. He survived, but remembered nothing of his attacker's face. And then, less than a month later, 19-year-old Sarah Lawman was found in her home with severe head injuries. Neighbors broke in after she didn't answer the door. She survived, barely, and she could only recall seeing a shadow at the edge of her bed before everything went black. Then, November 27th, Mac Pepitone's wife returned home late that night to find a scene straight out of a horror movie. Her husband lay in the bedroom, his head crushed, blood pooling beneath him. On the walls, spray so wide and heavy, it looked like someone had painted it. She caught a glimpse, just a glimpse, of a man fleeing into the night, and she could see an axe glinting in his hand. He slipped into a waiting car and vanished. And that was the last confirmed attack. After Pepitone, the Axeman simply stopped. Some say he died. Some say he was arrested for something else. Some say that he kept walking the streets, waiting for the right song to bring him back. The Axeman vanished after October of 1919 with no arrests, and all they have left was a trail of blood-soaked rooms, chiseled door frames, and a city that still wonders what kind of man or thing could have done it. Many of the victims were Italian grocers, their families living above the shop, and that fact made some whisper about the Black Hand, a Sicilian extortion racket that thrived in New Orleans at the time. It was one of those pay up, you're left alone, refuse, and maybe you'll live to regret it. But the problem with that theory is that the attacks didn't always make business sense. Some of the victims had no known mob ties, and others were well liked with no enemies on record. If this was organized crime, it was very unorganized. In December of 2019, a man named Joseph Mumphrey was shot dead in Los Angeles by a woman named Esther Albano. She claimed that Mumphrey had murdered her husband, Mac Pepitone, in one of the Axeman's final attacks. Some say Mumphrey's death ended the killings. The problem is that the records on Mumphrey are thin. Some historians can't even prove he existed in New Orleans at the time that the axe murders happened. He might have been a small-time crook or just a convenient name to hang the mystery on. Regardless, the Axeman's methods weren't flawless. Sometimes he killed with surgical precision, but other times he left survivors badly beaten but alive. The level of violence shifted. It led some criminologists to wonder, was it really one man? Or did fear itself create imitators? And then there's the story the Axeman himself wrote, the one where he wasn't a man at all, but a demon from the hottest hell who loved jazz. It sounds ridiculous until you hear the survivors. Some swore he moved without sound, struck without warning, and vanished as if he stepped sideways into another place. He left no footprints in wet ground. No witnesses could ever describe his face. They could only describe the weight in the room and the smell of iron. Whatever story you believe, there's one thing that they can all agree on. The Axeman didn't just kill people, he got inside the city's head. Over the years, suspects rose and fell. Joseph Mumphrey, a nameless drifter, multiple killers, supernatural force, all tied forever to the rhythm of jazz. Historians debated motives, criminologists picked apart the crime scenes, and yet, not one theory closes the door. Not one answer could explain everything. Jazz musicians immortalized him in songs. Locals passed the story down like a cautionary tale. In the city's darker corners, some swore you could still feel him. On certain nights when the streets were quiet and the music cuts out too soon. Maybe the Axeman died a century ago, or maybe he's still out there, leaning in the shadow, just waiting for the right tune. That's it for today's episode. Thanks for listening to Legends May Live. If you enjoyed today's story, please remember to like and subscribe. Until next time, keep a lookout and bring your axe inside at night, because legends may live.